had one eye open, watching to going down the tubes. So that was a tremendously successful experience relative to the other one, which was really intensely painful, and I didn't sleep, and thought about no matter what damage it does to my body, and if it takes me a week or a month to recover, I simply want this out. And in fact, I just passed it. I didn't have any interventions done. It made its way out, and I was sore for a number of days or something. Anyway, those are all very fascinating stories. Want to check in. As we're telling our little gruesome tales. Mike, do you care to add anything as far as curiosity gone wrong, or any other themes that we've picked up on?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Okay. I'm just going to occasionally ask you. We've been talking mostly about children. I actually incidentally already brought up the context of school. So I was at a public school when I ate that Siamese food. I wanted to talk about what happens in schools, and in particular in regard to curiosity. How does curiosity get to the point where people actually can even get upset by certain subject matter? So I don't know that I don't know how long we'll talk about this, but that's kind of what I want to talk about next. I've already told you instead of asking questions about it, but I'm gonna, as if I didn't just say what I just said. So Rose, your son, you were talking about him at school. Did you notice as he went through schooling, and I don't know what kind of schools he went to, but did you notice in the first even weeks of him being in public school, did you notice a shift in him at all?
He seemed to like school.
I think I remember you telling me that. That's right. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. He actually went to a couple of different schools. He went to a couple of places. There were one of the early schools he went to. It was a private school, and it was a fairly small school, and the kids, they didn't really have proper control of them. And my son used to complain, that stuff that the kids would do. He'd come home and tell me, and different things would happen. And I tried to talk to the headmistress, and anything I asked her about, she'd say it didn't happen here.
Okay.
And finally, after a while, my son, I guess, couldn't take it anymore, the way the kids were acting and out of control, and he finally did something. And the headmistress told me about it, and I said, and I felt bad about it. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry about him doing it. I'd like to try to, rectify things." And she said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I took care of it." And I'm sure what she did was she just said to the other kids involved, to the parents, she probably just said it didn't happen here.
Okay, so I'm imagining your son set a boundary physically in some way. I think you've even told me this story already, but he set some kind of a boundary, and then hopefully it did reduce the actual issues for him. But on keeping the subject around curiosity, did you notice any changes in your son's curiosity shortly after he started school, or even across years?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay, so let's just speculate here. I've actually taught school. I didn't teach elementary school, but I've taught public school briefly, and I assume everybody here has attended public schools, but maybe some people didn't attend public schools, or you attended a school that's maybe a lot different than what other people did. Maybe Vanessa will comment on that in some way. Oh, I know you have some stories about school that I happen to know that we can.
Yeah, I'm gonna do
not early, not kindergarten.
I'm not gonna talk about it.
Okay, there are differences, of course. If we jump just for we'll come back to younger kids in a minute, but if you go to a college context, I know some of the people on this call have been to college. So if you think of a college setting, what happens to curiosity in college or in high school? Like a child goes to school, what's the normal process of the day in regard to curiosity? Anybody care to comment?
Like me, I also went to a couple of different one of the schools I went to was an open school, and we could do whatever we wanted, study whatever we wanted, and so anything I was curious about, I could learn. So I could learn as fast as I wanted, which I liked. I afterwards I went to like a different type of school where you sit down and you learn at the pace everyone else does, and I found that mostly boring. I didn't like the whole class have to be at the same pace because I learned very quickly back then.
Okay, so you mentioned
to go to school where everyone learns at the same pace.
So you mentioned the open school where you got to explore your curiosity, and then you mentioned the school where you were, where everybody was like, there was a certain pace the entire class went at, and for you, it was often slower than you would have liked. What did you like? Do you remember how it was in the like in a given day? You're in the classroom, you finish some assignment, and then other people are still working on it, and you're done. Do you remember what that was like?
Yeah. I didn't. I wanted to go to the next thing.
Okay.
I wanted to learn the next thing.
Okay. Did you eventually learn to like fill your time in a way that was useful to you, or what do you recall?
I would just wait. I lacked patience, but I didn't like it. I tried to tell, the adults, my teacher, my mother, whoever, and they never understood, and I guess I wasn't good at making myself understood.
Well, I've been in classrooms where I got additional assignments. If I finished something, I could request more, and they would give me next week's assignment and let me work ahead. I've also been in classes where I was able to complete assignments ahead of time, and then I had other assignments from other classes, or even just had a book that I enjoyed reading, or any number of other things that I could do while sitting in the class waiting for other students to catch up, or waiting for the class to end, or whatever it would be. And there was a limit to my curiosity in the sense of I've got to be sitting in that chair. Or in some cases I was like restricted to I have to sit in that chair. But anything I can do from that chair that doesn't disrupt the class, I was allowed to do if I had completed my work. Go ahead.
One thing that I did where we all sat and learned at the same pace, and I learned it quickly, and they would take a long time, most of the other kids, I would start sketching pictures of everyone in the classroom.
Okay, yeah.
And sketching pictures of things from my mind, and then sometimes I get the pictures out to the people and stuff, to the other students. So that's something I filled some time with, is making sketches.
Okay, and you probably over time, you might have already been good at it, but you hand the sketches to people, and it's social, has a social element. If you do it for enough time, you eventually get better at it, or somebody says, oh, could you draw me a blah, blah, blah. One of the most popular things in jail, I happen to know from firsthand experience, is people who draw really well. People who are in jail for long periods of time will pay other people to make them cards, greeting cards to send to their little kids. So one guy I know, he drew a lot of Disney characters or other characters that would be familiar to children, cartoon characters, and he drew them really well. And so basically he had a little business in jail where the other inmates would give him food, or I don't know if they paid him a lot of money, but maybe they gave him stamps or something, however they worked it out. He had something like a business where he got favors, and whether it was cigarettes or whatever, doesn't really matter. But it reminded me of being in school. One of the funny things about being in jail, I haven't, the longest I've been in jail is a few, the same sequence, back to back to back, is a few weeks. There have been times when I was there, then I would get released because I had money or something, I could get released, but then I would have to go back. So across relatively short periods of time, I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so It was super boring. The number one like punishment is obviously you're restricted in terms of not being able to go outside or whatever. You maybe have access to a phone a few hours a day or whatever those kind of things are. But the primary pastimes would be like playing cards, playing chess, playing a board game. You know, there was so little variety of things to do. I would read some, but you could talk to other people, of course. But ultimately, it was like the kinds of things I did in school. It really reminded me of school. And, I'm doing all these things to pass the time. I'm waiting for next Tuesday to come, or I'm waiting for 3 p.m. to come. It's the same thing in a different, amount of time frame. But we've got,
a show I've been watching, Orange is the New Black.
Go ahead.
I'm watching a show recently called Orange is the New Black. It's about a women's prison. And someone was commenting in the visiting room how the lighting and the bricks and everything were just like the schools.
Oh, yeah.
Prison. It's like punishing people by making them remember how it was to be in school.
Well, it's certainly different. I was in jail, not prison. Prison technically would be like 1 year or longer sentences, and there's all sorts of little variations in the different terminology. But the basic similarity to school was obvious to me, and then I went to different schools. So different schools that I attended, obviously an open school like Rose talked about, that would be a very different thing. But generally, what happens in a school? We're given, what happens in a school? What's the major thing on the whole that happens? Do you want to comment? So what happens in a school? Like, what's it for? What's going on as it relates to the children's attention, the children's time, the children's curiosity? What is the larger process?
Well, I know I complained at one of the schools my son went to. I went there for like 3 or 4 years, and the teacher didn't seem to really care about teaching. And I complained to her one time. I said, the best thing that I believe you could teach a child is to foster their love for learning. And she was like, well, I just have to teach what's in the workbook. And she didn't get it. A lot of schools will just teach whatever they have to, and they don't really care about lighting the flame of the child enjoying learning.
Right. So we have different settings where, in some cases, there's very specific curriculum, and the teacher's job is to meet certain measures in the children's competence. And like a teacher who doesn't do that will be disciplined and potentially lose their job or be retrained or whatever, so that they can hopefully deliver certain areas of competence to the students. In a setting like college, there's more choice on the part of the student to select themselves into particular subject matter, specific kind of classes. They can have a science lab class or a music class or something, a performance class that can be engaging to them. So if you like to sketch, you can take a class in that. At some schools, that can be a class you can choose to take. Other schools, you have to take a class where you're going to do some drawing. So there's a variety of things that can happen.
Yeah, I had choices. Like in the open school, we had a lot of choices. You could choose what classes you took and stuff. And in the high school also, we got to choose what classes we took. But in the other school I went to in between, there was no choice, just whatever they told you that you had to do.
So if you were teaching, imagine a teacher. So they have a measurement that's going to be made of their class. The class is going to be tested maybe multiple times in a certain year, in a single year or single, whatever you call it, 9-month cycle, at the end of a semester or a quarter or whatever. There'll be ongoing testing at various times. And the teacher knows that. The teacher knows that their job is their job security is related to the test material. So I actually worked for a company for quite a while where we prepared students for college entrance exams. So we taught the test. We were not interested in promoting curiosity. We were not interested in the love of learning of the student. These people were paying us $700 or $1,500 or whatever for a course in which we would help them raise their score. And we taught them test-taking strategies. We did teach them content, but only to specific people where we identified, or in specific cases where we identified this is going to be worth our limited amount of time to focus on that. In other cases, we would really take a student that was decent at a certain subject matter and give them time management strategies, really what it came down to on those tests, because there would often be 50 questions on a section, and the typical student would answer 35 of them and not even get to 15. So we would make a point to have students skim through questions and learn to identify certain kinds of questions, look for ones that they could do quickly with a high percentage of likelihood that they would get a positive result. And those tests were scored in ways where you got a big point if you got it right, and if you got it wrong, there was like you'd lose a certain amount, and if you didn't answer it, there was a different thing. So getting it wrong and not answering did not have the same result in some of those tests. This is trivia, but the point is, as an instructor for doing college entrance exam preparation, I was teaching the tests for sure, and that was my job. And if I were not able to produce that outcome for the students, I would be, I would not have been able to continue working in that company. So what happened was that I got specialized in being like the pinch hitter. This is a baseball reference, but I was so good at teaching certain stuff that I would be brought in to other classes. Like if another teacher was a few sessions in and they weren't doing well with regard to their class's performance in math and analyticals. I forget exactly what it was called in the SAT or whatever the test was, but I think it's the quantitative and analytical section or something like that. And if the verbal section wasn't my strength, but I would be brought in to teach the things that were my strength. So the company I worked for, Princeton Review, identified certain capacities that I had, and then within our geographic area, they would send me to other sites to fill in. Certainly, if individuals needed tutoring, there were certain things that I was able to convey to them well. But one of the things I didn't necessarily get off on that. I did somewhat, I liked that. I mean, I was proud of it. I am proud of it. But I think the thing that I found most interesting was when I did one-on-one tutoring, and I would find like creative solutions, and I would, like in a consulting mode, be able to work with someone whose the English wasn't their first language, or they had. I remember people who had back issues, physical issues with their back, and that was a factor in a 3-hour-long test. And so I remember the kinds of consulting that I did. I was not there to help the person learn math better. If that happened, great, but that was not my job. My job was to help them get a better score so they could get into law school or get into undergraduate school or whatever, college in general. So the curiosity of the teacher, I'm just jumping subject